Have you ever suspected that everything you see and hear might be a lie? Welcome to Bookspresso. We'll brew you a strong cup of a book. After the story is over, I will ask you the same question again. Please be sure to share your thoughts in the comments. This is George Orwell's novel 1984. The story begins in an apartment in the grey city of London. A man named Winston Smith lived there. The world he lived in was a place where everything was monitored. The telescreens on the wall never missed a single movement of the people. Every morning, Winston began his day listening to the party's propaganda blaring from the speaker. In the midst of his indifferent daily life, he would often fall into deep thought alone. He felt himself gradually disappearing in a world where truth was manipulated and history was distorted. Winston's job was to revise records at the Ministry of Truth. That meant erasing truth and creating lies. He would sit all day long fixing erased names and vanished events. The past was recreated every day at his fingertips. He found all these actions dreadful, but he worked with a mask on. Don't know who I am. He felt so crushed by the weight of the lies he was creating that he could barely breathe. Then one day, Winston obtained an old diary. It was an act of breaking the party's rules, but he couldn't stop. The moment he wrote the first sentence in the diary, Winston felt a thrill at the fact that he was deceiving Big Brother's eyes. He began to record his true thoughts. His diary was gradually filled with anger and hatred for the party. But that happiness was short-lived. Winston was constantly tormented by the feeling of being watched. He felt as if someone was watching him from behind the wall, and that the telescreen could peek at him at any moment. Then one day, Winston met a young woman named Julia who worked in the Ministry of Truth's canteen. He felt revulsion every time he saw her. He thought she might be the party's most loyal member and a spy watching him. Then one day, Julia handed Winston a note. The note said, "I love you." Winston couldn't believe it. Because of that one note, he realized that everything he had thought about Julia was wrong. The revulsion he felt for Julia was instantly replaced with love in his heart. The two of them met for the first time in a forest on the outskirts of the city. There was no telescreen there, and they were free. Winston held Julia's hand and poured out the stories that had been trapped in his heart. Her hand was warm, and it calmed his anxious mind. Julia was not interested in grand ideologies or revolution. She just wanted to satisfy her own desires, away from Big Brother's surveillance. Seeing her, Winston thought that her life might be far more dangerous and brave. Julia said, "We don't need a revolution. Maybe we can just be happy together." Together with her, he began to discover the joys of a hidden life one by one. They rented an old attic on the outskirts of the city and made it their own secret place. There was no telescreen there. In that place, they relied on each other and regained their humanity. Through Julia, Winston rediscovered the senses he had forgotten. He held Julia's hand and told her stories about the past. But Julia was not interested in the past. She only wanted to enjoy the present moment. This difference between the two made their relationship all the more subtle. One day, Winston told Julia about a person he had harbored in his heart for a long time. He was a high-ranking party member, O'Brien. Winston believed that O'Brien was a revolutionary like himself, who was against Big Brother. Winston proposed to Julia that they join a secret organization called the Brotherhood with O'Brien. Julia hesitated, but seeing the conviction in Winston's eyes, she accepted his proposal. They went to O'Brien's mansion. O'Brien welcomed them warmly. He explained in detail the true purpose of Big Brother and the existence of the Brotherhood. His words turned Winston's long-held suspicions into certainty. Winston held O'Brien's hand and believed he was their savior. But the moment they left O'Brien's house, they fell into an unexpected trap. They were suddenly arrested by the thought police. Winston realized, I was deceived. They were dragged into the pitch-black darkness. Winston had no idea where he was being taken. He felt as if he was sinking into an abyss, filled only with terror and despair. The place he arrived at was the place of terror, the Ministry of Love. It was filled with people whose human dignity had been completely destroyed. Winston was reunited with O'Brien there, but O'Brien was not the person Winston had known. He looked at Winston with a cold and cruel face. He said to Winston, "Do you know why you came here?" O'Brien continued, "We will turn your hatred into love. You will come to love Big Brother." O'Brien began to torture Winston. He asked Winston what he truly wanted and made him deny what he believed to be true. It was not only physical pain, but also mental torture. Winston eventually gave up everything and began to submit to O'Brien's words. Winston finally admitted everything. He accepted that Big Brother was right and that he was wrong. But in his heart, love for Julia still remained. O'Brien presented Winston with a final choice. "Do you still love Julia?" Winston nodded. O'Brien took Winston to Room 101. It was a place where one confronts their deepest fears. Winston faced his deepest fear there. It was rats. O'Brien placed a wire cage full of rats on Winston's face. Winston was engulfed in terrible fear. He screamed, "Do it to Julia! Do it to Julia! Not me, do it to Julia!" Winston had finally betrayed the person he held most dear. Those words that came out of his mouth destroyed all his humanity. He was now Big Brother's perfect slave. Winston, having lost everything, came back out into the world. He was walking through the grey city of London. His eyes were no longer empty. They held love for Big Brother. One day, Winston came face to face with Julia. The two looked at each other, but their eyes no longer held love. They walked away from each other. Winston sat in the Chestnut Tree Cafe playing a game of chess. He gazed at the portrait of Big Brother on the wall. His eyes were peaceful. He no longer suffered or doubted. He had finally given up all his freedom and was embraced by Big Brother. He thought, "Found peace. Come to love Big Brother." After being imprisoned and tortured, Winston realized that his entire life had been under Big Brother's control. In the world of lies he had created, he had lost his true self. Through this novel, George Orwell throws a terrible warning at us. The world ruled by Big Brother is not just a world of dictatorship and surveillance. It is a world where even our inner selves are controlled. As we read this novel, we should reflect on our own lives. Are we really living in a world without Big Brother? Or are we already living under Big Brother's shadow? Now I ask you, have you ever suspected that everything you see and hear might be a lie? This was Bookspresso. Thank you.